God-sized story.
Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of God-Sized Stories. Today I have both Andy and Corey on. They're both great artists and they both draw comics, but they also have a class that they were doing together at their church, which is what we'll talk about in Monday's episode. But for today, for the bonus episode, I'm just going to give them each a couple of minutes to talk about the comics that they're making. Andy, tell us about yours.
Yeah, so again, I'm Andy Hungisto, real quick, and I decided to start a comic. So growing up, I made a few comics, but each of which are kind of your generic-y, kind of crazy action, hero runs around punching bad guys kind of stuff. But in the past couple of years, as more of an adult, if you could say that about me, I've really gotten into like fantasy kind of genres like Dungeons and Dragons and Lord of the Rings, and specifically my gateway in was a game series called Dark Souls. And those games, that sounds bad, I know, you're like, well, that doesn't sound like a happy game. And they're not, they're really not happy games, but yeah, they're really not very explicit. And I became very inspired by their art style, but the more I got used to the games and how much they're just about exploring and learning about a world and not being beat over the head with it. Like, it's really not, it really is there for you to figure out. And throughout those games, I was inspired to create a comic that is very explorative, a lot of a character moving around very specific set pieces in large locations and domains and discovering what happened. It's basically like coming in on a crime scene and then kind of trying to figure out what happened in this room, except the room is a giant fantasy domain and there's dragons and monsters and stuff like that. But and the reason I like Dark Souls so much is because it's a strange, like in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, the Bible does not pull punches. It doesn't pretend that bad things don't happen, but God always is worked in, or not worked in, but more like is ultimately always bends things in the right way. And I think it's interesting. The Dark Souls series is about a world that basically is utterly failed. And from a Christian perspective, I've always found it interesting because it's a game it's a series that describes it. If all of its pieces were formed like a puzzle, it would fit perfectly around its negative space would be where God would fit. It's a world that was destroyed because it lacks love. And I find that really interesting. It's like reverse engineering talking about the gospel. And so I think it's an interesting way to get people interested in a fantasy story where at the end of the day, I still want to kind of to point to God in a story that I'm making. I think that's still important, but I don't want to do it in a beat you over the head kind of way, in the same way that I appreciate that the game doesn't do that. So my story, very subtly, as it moves forward, will attempt to ask questions of, hopefully the reader will ask questions about how the world works. So, yeah.
So if someone's interested, where would they look for that?
They would go to Instagram, and my Instagram is Hungistador, which is kind of a play on my last name, which is HONGISTADOR. And there's no numbers, no nothing, and then you can see my art there. I post videos of some of the art that I make, and I post pictures, and then the comic goes up there as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Andy. Corey, how about you and your comic?
Yeah, so similar to Andy, I got inspired by kind of this brokenness of people and stuff. And so I've always been heavily inspired by like superhero comics, specifically ones that, like, my favorite comic book hero was Daredevil growing up, because of just how, like, nothing ever worked out for him. he always has like a broken limb at some point, and like his arm is always broken by the end of like a comics, like a storyline or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he somehow just like, it's just like the sheer force of will of like doing the right thing against all odds. And then sometimes the right thing just doesn't even work out and he has to deal with the repercussions, right? And like that's real life for me. Like that's my life, is that like I have tried so many things in my life and failed at them. You know what I mean? And like and that's a life, that's pretty much everybody's life, I'd assume, right? But I related so heavily with Daredevil and other Marvel comic book heroes because of that, because things just don't work out sometimes, right? Despite all of Spider-Man's efforts, his aunt still dies, right? And it's like, dang, you know? And then they undid it with this horrible storyline where he makes the deal with the devil and stuff, and it's just not good. But anyways, so in Christianity sense, it almost relates it like, yeah, like your life is, God never promises you an easy life, right? Like you have to deal with what's handed to you, knowing that there's a higher power and there's a plan for all of it, right? And so much so that like I think I like Daredevil so much because they always kind of relied on, like, I'm not Catholic, but they relied on Matt Murdock, who's Daredevil, his like Catholic upbringing and stuff in the comics. So anyways, the comic I'm writing is called Relic Stone. And it's about a girl who is separated from her family at like age 9, and for a reason that is revealed throughout the graphic novel. And so early on in the story, you find out that she meets this like kind of ominous character in a cave. So this is a very high fantasy world, very based in like magic powers while also blending sci-fi with it. So there's some science fiction and stuff in there as well, stuff you would see with like Star Wars or like Star Trek and things like that, right? So like fantasy in a modern day sense, really. And so this girl meets this like ominous character, and he reveals some things about her that she's like, whoa, how do you know this about me? And he says, in order to prevent this like world-ending thing from happening, your mother has to die, right? And she's like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen my mother in like 11 years, right? And so then shenanigans happen, and which I haven't gotten to yet, but at the end of volume 1, she begins her journey to find, there's a little bit of a spoiler, I guess, whatever, I don't care. She begins her journey to go figure out like the truth behind all this, because for so long she assumed her mother was dead. And so the themes throughout the story are heartbreak and dealing with people letting you down. There are certain points in the story where she'll realize that like despite all that she can do, it can't work out, right? And that is almost the theme of the story, is that like sometimes life just happens and you play your part in it and you do the best you can to come out a positive person, right? And so currently in the storyline, she's been tempted with like killing this one person. Like she has the power to kill this person, and is she going to choose to do that or not? Right? And so yeah, there's some real life stuff. It has a definitive ending. It's not like a superhero comic that just goes on forever. There's going to be like 4 volumes to it that plan on having like physical releases. So I'm currently releasing volume 1 over Instagram in its basic form, and then there will be additional like pages and panels and stuff that gets added to the like official release and stuff that won't be on Instagram. So yeah, that's the comic I work. Right now I'm balancing a full-time job getting ready for a baby and all that stuff. So my Instagram, my art Instagram has divulged to me just putting out comic pages because I'm in like the last 10 pages before it's done for volume 1, and I'm just like, this is 100% of my art time is going towards doing this.
I bet.
Right now, because I just want to get the first volume finished of it. I had no idea before I got started with this how much of an undertaking creating a comic, a defined piece of like visual media was going to be. But,
Well, guys, thank you so much for spending this time right now. I'll also link both of your accounts in the description of this, so you, the audience, can find them. And audience, look forward to the full episode when you learn a little bit more about how these gentlemen have allowed God to use them in art and their church all wrapped together. And until then, thank you for listening. I couldn't do this without you. Goodbye.